Cloud and Clear, the podcast by SADA for innovative business leaders and technology enthusiasts, where we explore how Google Cloud is transforming the industry and what that means to you. Now, here's your host, Tony Safoian.
Aaron Brown, welcome to Cloud and Clear.
Hey, Tony. Thanks for having me.
So great to have you. Just saw each other in New York, and now we're doing this. It's great to connect. We're actually making a video over there as well about your journey. So I'm sure that will cover part of everything that's so exciting that you guys are doing in your ad tech space in general, but also with Google Cloud. But I also enjoy these kind of conversations. It feels like we can get deeper here.
Yeah, it's been a really exciting time, both just as a company and in the industry, and just being in New York.
So look, I'm talking to you, you're chief scientist, and MadHive is ad tech using blockchain. So it's all the buzzword bingo right now.
That's right.
So I think for our listeners, I think they want to know everything. A, what does MadHive do? How do you define ad tech? How do you guys use blockchain? Let's start there, because I think that's kind of a good foundation of MadHive, and I think it'll create a context for the rest of the conversation.
Sure. So ad tech is the science and infrastructural aspects of digital advertising. So we help advertising clients with things like machine learning, real-time decisioning, large-scale ad distribution, anything to help increase their reach and make ads more effective. I think as far as the engineering challenges go, the real interesting things are the speed and the pace that everything works in advertising. So, for example, with digital advertising, we don't necessarily know when a viewer is going to turn on the TV, open an app, go to a webpage.
Right.
And this is happening nonstop around the world, 24 hours a day at huge volumes. And these advertising requests come in millions per second. And we have to decide among all of the available options, which ad to show where, how to optimize, how to make sure we're showing the right ad to the right people, how to make sure we're not showing too much at one time, how to make sure we're staying in budget. And we have to do this in real time. So as users are turning on their devices, those ad requests go out. So we have sometimes as little as 10 milliseconds to get everything done. So that's, getting events from the server, that's, serializing, deserializing messages, database lookups, real-time inference on machine learning models, everything. At the same time, this all sort of exists in an industry that is notoriously low tech. We work with partners who, their idea about big data is putting a lot of spreadsheets into Dropbox, sharing screen captures. Some clients even, send faxes, run messages across the street.
Wow.
There is a lot of people involved. There's a lot of potential for data loss, both by accident and on purpose. And that's the second thing that MadHive does. Because we're in an industry where there is so much volume, there is so much potential for loss of data and loss of fidelity of data, we introduced the notion of cryptography end-to-end. And that's more than just, encrypting messages and keeping them safe. That's creating a sort of means of both the custody of data and the fidelity of data. So to put that in an engineering context, you could think of a lot of companies having API servers, and essentially they pretty much boil down to something. A request comes in, you're going to do a database lookup, you're going to transform the data and give a response, but that other party is just sort of trusting you, and they say hey, I just believe what you say. Which most of the time
actually happened.
Exactly. Most of the time it's fine.
This happened. Here's my report telling you. Here's what happened, and here's how many times this appeared, and here's how much it cost, and here's how many people saw it. Believe me.
Exactly. So you get a big advertiser, say you're a very large fast food chain and you just, you want to sell your hamburgers and you're showing an ad and, you come to an ad tech company and, they make sure that it gets shown and, that large fast food company comes back at the end of the campaign and they're like, okay, what happened? And they say, oh, we showed your ad on TV, 100 million times. Didn't you see people come in and eat hamburgers? Like that was us. Pay us and we'll do it again. But this is really problematic, because you could see how, things get miscounted, like I said, either by accident or sometimes even on purpose. By adding these elements of cryptography end to end, like hashing data, signing data, just keeping track of everything so that it's difficult to do any kind of transformation on data that isn't approved or provable. You can actually create systems where at the end of the day, you can say, this is exactly what happened. And by the rules and laws of mathematics that no other thing happened.
Right. And is that where blockchain comes into play?
Yeah. Blockchain is really great for this because that kind of characteristic is what blockchain as we know it does for like moving tokens around on the blockchain. You can say, there's no doubt about, say, Bitcoin balances or smart contract execution. Like these things happened.
Right.
What is really interesting is when you start to unpack that technology, because blockchain is really novel. It's just a few very simple cryptographic primitives combined in an elegant way. And it gives this data this property. Suddenly ones and zeros act like money, whereas most data doesn't have that property. Right. Combining these cryptographic methods in different ways can give rise to new properties. Things, for example, more suited to advertising. So, like, for example, one of the questions that comes up frequently is people who are familiar with ad tech scale, handling millions and millions of transactions per second. They say, okay, that's a really attractive idea if you can make your data act like a blockchain, but blockchains do like 10 transactions per second. How does that work? And
right. It's not fast enough.
Yeah. And the answer is, well, ads are not tokens. Ads have different properties. They're used and consumed in different kinds of ways. But there are, following the same principles, how blockchains are composed, you can combine cryptographic methods to make systems which handle that workload and handle it very elegantly. The actual OG blockchains really come into use, though. There are, even in those more complex cryptographic systems, there's sometimes like a bit of a cold start problem. You just need like a base truth to get going. And those are actually a great fit for us. And so we're both inspired, extending, and using blockchains internally for that stuff.
But it's not like some public ledger. You've delivered and kind of created this blockchain infrastructure purpose built for MadHive and your customers, right?
For MadHive and for the advertising community at large. Advertising is a highly collaborative activity. One ad often involves sometimes 30 parties. Right. We work very closely with the industry standard bodies. There is, in our industry, there is a body called Ad Ledger. That is the blockchain advertising standards group. And they represent pretty much all of the ad spend in the world. It's been a really attractive notion, and you can understand why. You have billions and trillions of dollars going back and forth on wink, wink, trust me. Right. So the idea that we can do all of these transactions that we do today and more using these cryptographic methods at large scale to get certainty in our data is really compelling. And so there's an eager audience. But this ties back to your question about the public ledger. It is used and being experimented with and run in production by some very, very large media companies. But it's for companies that are engaged in the heart of advertising. Right. Somewhat in its current stage, it's available, but less interesting. for just everyday consumers. We think that in a future state, not too long from now, there will be greater involvement, mostly by our devices and, our privacy-oriented push. But, today in 2019, it's large media companies.
It's really interesting. Let's take a step back a little bit. I met Adam. I think I met Tom for a few minutes as well. But can you talk about the origin story of MadHive a little bit? Like, obviously, there was a problem that was identified when the founders decided to do this. And these are some serious founders, right?
Most definitely. It's a really smart group. So Adam Helfgott is our CEO. He is a serial successful entrepreneur, several big exits, the last of which was somewhat more related to media. It was what gave him the exposure to just all of the problems. Tom, he's our CTO. Again, a series of successful startups. You may have heard of this one called Zynga.
Yeah.
They made some games that were very popular. And, working in the cloud at huge scale, building large, reliable systems, exactly the kinds of things that advertising needed and needs to be. And our whole team is like, it's incredible to work here. Like when you come every day, like you're just dealing with like rock stars.
Yeah, I felt the energy when I walked in, and it's New York startup, like we're in LA and I'm in the Bay Area a lot. I'm in New York a lot, but like people don't realize, maybe some people do now, just that energy that exists in New York. I just feel like it's to me it felt a little different even, It's
an exciting problem, and we draw a lot of really talented people to come work on this. Almost no one on our team has prior ad tech experience. We all come from different kinds of backgrounds, but there are some core problems that exist across every business. And so they weren't unfamiliar. They were just, they seem to be exacerbated in ad tech. And so it was a really sort of fertile industry for application of just modern technology.
And I could even tell that, how engaged your customers are, only because just incidentally, I think the CTO of one of your customers, very, very big company, I won't name names because I don't know if we're allowed to, but he just walked into your office and Adam was, we were filming with Adam and Adam's like, okay, I got to go now. And I was like, totally understand. I would do the same thing, meet with the customer. But like the fact that they're coming over there and just meeting like, executive to executive, and I can only imagine the kind of things they're talking about. It just seems like your customers are super excited.
Yeah, we're coming at them with solutions to long-standing problems that were not easy to solve, but they were fun to solve. And we want to make a really big impact. And it's it's sort of like every small company's dream, just to sort of, rocket to the top and just literally have those CEOs of very, very, very large companies coming in the door. And so it's been super exciting. But it just boils down to a simple principle that if we can help these companies do business, not with guesswork, but with real evidence, then we can make them 100 times more powerful. They waste so much time and money just trying to figure out, just counting ads. And this is sort of counting and getting good data is kind of a prerequisite to everything else. We don't know how much money to send back and forth. We can't run our big data analytics, our ML jobs, unless we have good data coming in the first place.
Something that Adam mentioned you guys are doing, I think you and I talked about it a little bit, and if it's secret sauce, feel free to pass, but he described to me high level how one thing you're doing around the audit process with like these large audit firms, just one process that you guys have introduced just saves like $500,000 to $1 million just in audit costs.
Easily. And actually, it's not secret sauce. It's Google Stackdriver. It's brilliant. It helps. Not only does it keep your services online, there, like lots of engineers know, but we face an interesting problem as a small company coming up, because, every startup, sort of, pounds pavement and tries to get the business in. And there's an interesting problem behind it. You get large corporations that are like, okay, we're interested, but hey, you're a startup, you're 7 people. We're no longer 7 people, but, not long ago, we were just a few people. And, they're like, we need something, you're telling us great things. We need something to prove it, and this is very much in our ethos and so, happily. And so what we were able to do with those publicly traded companies' audit divisions is, say, hey, we have all of our customer data siloed, everything encrypted separately with Google KMS keys, everything using our cryptographic signatures as identifiers. We can actually just set up stacked target export rules, and your data belongs to you. We're happy to share it with you, and we can just export everything in real time as it comes in. The audit teams, they already use Google BigQuery. They're like, yeah, that's great, because the first thing we have to do is usually get all the stuff imported so we can start querying on it, and just streams right in. And that worked amazingly well for everybody. And It didn't take more than 15 minutes to set up. And we were off to the races.
Unbelievable. Just that one thing, a couple things.
So it was just creative thinking by the engineering team, and just ease of use.
Amazing. Okay, going back to you and your role, chief scientist. You didn't start off as a chief scientist. You're, kind of head of engineering. I think when you first came in, it's only been a couple years there. I can't believe it's only been a couple of years. It seems like you guys have done a lot. It's like so much in 2 years. Adam told me you guys are profitable already, like all this amazing stuff. But like, what does a chief scientist do? I think our audience wants to know, like, what is a chief scientist, Aaron?
Everything. No. So
it's a startup, so it's everything. I get it. Like,
that is true. As chief scientist, I would say it's a blended role. I am the principal engineer at MadHive, and also I oversee a research team. Our research team has 2 primary focus. One is just very advanced machine learning for our classic ad tech offering that is just finding audiences who are receptive to the ads, just getting a better match. We only do right now digital advertising, and so that's all addressable, individual, curated advertising. And so, we have a lot of advantages that you don't get when you're printing newspapers or running TV ads where everybody sees the same one. We do also modeling for those. We help them find the best place to find their audiences based on digital behavior. Mm-hmm. And then the other side is this privacy initiative, which is sort of our flagship feature. We are coming as outsiders and sort of learning the business as we scale up. We were immediately alarmed at sort of the degree of data that flows through all these pipes, very personal information about everybody. From a business side, it makes sense. The applications and websites and TV stations, in order to solicit the highest price for their ads to make the most money to run their business, they need to enrich that with as much information about we consumers as possible. But just the current model where everything just sort of gets broadcast to everyone has tons of problems, like, but just the consumer privacy, invasion, the bad uses of that. We've seen lots of big public incidents with, data leaks and, elections and just, other kinds of nefarious incidents. We also have problems with businesses working together. They have privacy needs too. So, for example, these publishers, say you're the New York Times, for example, right? The New York Times may pride themselves on their readership. They say, we have they might be more apt to buy certain kinds of products. But if I don't want to pay that premium for all the hard work the New York Times has done to collect that information together, I just need to sort of sit back and wait and watch that audience and then collect them and then maybe buy those same users on a different outlet that doesn't cost as much. Maybe I can buy them when they're playing a game on their phone. And that's a big loss of that valuable brand and work that those publishers have built up. And then finally, of course, in advertising, you're only as good as the data you have. And, if you think about like sort of in a theoretical world, if a company like MadHive could, when we're doing our ad decisioning, if we could just have access to like every piece of data about you and, cross our fingers, promise not to do nefarious things, we could make a really fun advertising experience, like
absolutely.
Ads would be really cool if we were able to apply all the data. But that's only theoretical. That can't happen. Facebook is not going to say, "Oh, here you go, MadHive. Here's all the data that we have." And so, using these same methods that we have applied for audit and fidelity of data, we can do really, really cool things where we can share data sets. We can machine learn across data sets. We can validate third parties' data sets. We can revoke data sets, all without compromising the privacy of the user, the companies involved. And this is, again, a second really compelling feature for our clients because they see these problems looming. They already don't like, the dirty side of the advertising business where we're all holding everyone's private data. Also, it gives a chance for people to be more proactive in their data. For the first time, you can really own your data, which has been touted before, but it needs to be actionable. Like it needs to be able to be used for your benefit. Like, for example, to like curate and personalize your online content, but in a way that you control and can't be abused. And with these simple cryptographic techniques, you can put wrappers around the data such that it can only be used for pre-authorized purposes, no matter how bad that you want to. If you have some kind of nefarious intention, you would need to know something about mathematics, which is much more valuable than, some user's data. So we think there's a future with what we call the Mad Network.
Mm-hmm.
That the future, near future cryptographic ad protocol where all data is private end to end. And if you think about, companies being able to action, even machine learn on data that is totally private and distributed, you have a lot of opportunities where data then need not even leave the user's device. There's no reason why in the very near future we can't have, our televisions, participating in the ad selection process and making sure that, for example, if we're really interested in a new car, we only see the car ads that we might be interested in. Tell us a story about interesting facts.
That's so interesting. I mean, Aaron, it's like, TVs and other screens are, ever more, connected. And even the way that TV signals are transmitted is sort of digital at this stage. And still to this day, I'm flabbergasted by how much I see ads that are completely either irrelevant, like with regards to my interests. But how about that, like, I see things that I cannot even go procure because they're advertising a restaurant that doesn't exist in my state or within 50 miles of me.
Yeah.
Like, why am I seeing a Sonic ad? There's not a Sonic anywhere near me. Right?
That's true. What happens? And there are two primary causes for that. One are the business incentives. We had talked about before about there's, like a lot of opacity in, classic ad tech. And there are parties in the middle who just get paid by volume. Yeah. And they'll tell you anything that you want to hear. And so you have advertisers at one end, publishers at the other end, and they want to act honestly and productively, but they're sort of getting, always yes on both sides. And
yeah,
it's really funny because there are a lot of people that we encounter in advertising who just sort of have accepted that as like base truth. It's just cost of doing business.
Because they feel like it's like unsolvable, right?
Yeah. And so you just sort of bake into your prices, and it makes advertising really, really inefficient.
Right. It's like there's going to be 40% waste. I'm just going to assume that 40%, I'm burning 40% of this budget kind of thing. It's crazy.
Yeah. And if you think about the scale of advertising, I mean, advertising pays for the whole internet. The internet is free because of advertising. So the size of the economy is the size of the whole internet, and more than half of it is waste. We're talking about $1 trillion.
Wow.
So, when you put big numbers out there and you say, hey, let's just not do this, and let's not do this with a couple of simple hash algorithms, people listen.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I get why you guys went after some of the, big customers first to kind of prove that, because they have the biggest problems with regards to scale. If somebody has a $500 million budget, it means $250 million is being wasted, and they know it.
Yes.
And if you guys are approaching them with a solution, I think that's incredible. Look, I subscribe, like in all aspects of business, what your potential is some ratio of the value you're going to bring to the market. And if you've identified $1 trillion of waste, to me that kind of tells me MadHive can get really big, because anybody will be willing to pay you $10 to save 100, like any day of the week, right?
And that's what it's been. I mean, the demand has been incredible. We're 10 times the size we were, a year ago, and we're hiring anybody, MadHive.com. By this time next year, I hope we're 10 times bigger still.
Yeah, no. There's a lot of excitement in the office for sure. I think you guys had just come from, some of your team members went to, what event was it?
That is Cannes.
Cannes, of course. How could I forget? I was jealous of that.
Advertising, yeah.
And I read an article incidentally, I think the same week, about how much business actually gets done at Cannes, like this kind of seeding of relationships. And I'm sure they got a lot done. They told me there was just tons of interest, even from, upper mid-market customers and others. As you guys scale, I'm sure you won't only be, talking to the Fortune 50, but it's super, super interesting. The part of it.
Oh, it's very flattering, just to, because we have ideas. We're very honest in our intentions to make good solutions. And so it's really exciting to see the market, validate that stuff, and to have big companies that are, chasing down our people. It's just sort of amazing when you think about, what we were doing 2 years ago.
Yeah, like the guy that just walked into your office, literally chasing down Adam. Like, wow, this happens. Like you can have staged this. It's like, this is real. This is their life. And look, the other thing is, I think, philosophical and cultural. Like, you guys are like, look, we subscribe to the truth. We found a way to deliver the truth in an industry that's highly inefficient. And the whole promise of just mobile and data and being connected, and the internet is like, any industry that's inefficient will eventually be like just dramatically disrupted, because it will. That's just capitalism. That's just efficient markets. It's just going to happen. And you guys are playing a proactive role in maybe one of the most inefficient markets in the world that people don't even realize how inefficient it is. Super exciting space. And the timing is just phenomenal, because all these technologies are now coming together to allow you to deliver those services and capabilities to this market. Maybe that was not possible 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, things like cloud, of course, cryptography. Cryptography and cloud were sort of the unsung heroes here, because all of this new capability is powered by just a vast amount of data. And those two technologies work together really, really well. Cloud, just to scale infinitely, our favorite tools in Google Cloud, like Bigtable, BigQuery, TensorFlow on TPUs, Kubernetes, like anything like that, any job, any size that we have, we could just throw at some service and just come up with an answer and just not worry about, the engineering details of it. And then, the emergence of blockchain as, like a serious application of cryptography in business has been, immensely useful, because having data at huge scale, you're sort of like, you can't always keep track of it. You ask any data science, scientists, they're going to tell you, like, to get giant data sets, but there's always like problems, things don't match up, you're always sort of stuck working on all this. And that's a real impediment just to getting work done. And if that data is money, then that's a direct inefficiency. By using cryptography, you can tag and organize every little bit in such that no matter what the scale, petabytes, exabytes, you're not going to lose one bit. And that those two things together, be able to sort of, marshal and master all of the world's data, is just an incredibly powerful combination.
So you guys can build on anything you want. And, I always like to have a perspective on Google Cloud. This is Cloud and Clear, and it's also, very much about highlighting GCP and Google Cloud in general. So you guys can build on anything you want. You've chosen over time, and I'm not sure if it was the selection you made day one. I don't think it was, but to kind of emphasize and invest more in GCP particularly. And I think the listeners want to know why.
Yeah, no doubt. So as I mentioned before, MadHive has the good fortune of having attracted this amazing talent pool from around the world, from all kinds of backgrounds. As lifelong engineers, we've all used all of the clouds. And there was sort of at the beginning, just almost complete unanimous consensus that, if you got to choose for your own project, where would you be? And it was Google Cloud. The things that were really compelling for us as developers is like the tooling just made stuff really easy. I think the primary difference between Google and some of the other clouds are just the cohesiveness of the products. It sounds a little silly, but it makes a big difference when you're working on things, because real applications span multiple services. You use them together.
Right.
And when they glue and when they feel very siloed, you end up doing a lot of the glue work yourself. And that's just like a pain. It's hard to scale. And it just like, it's sort of also, as an engineer, when you're under a deadline, you don't really factor that kind of stuff in. Like you think about, okay, I got to scale this data up and I got to scale this compute up and they got to work together. And what you don't count is, oh, well, the thing that moves that stuff together, I'm going to actually write 80% of my code right there. We just don't have to do that. So it feels fun to program there.
You know what it sounds like to me? The feeling that I get is almost like using these tools makes it clear that Google's actually built this stuff for themselves, and they're just letting me use it too.
Yeah, and it shows. Thanks to Google, who happens to be an advertising company, the tools are amazing for advertising. Like the first and foremost, I think the ML tools are unique to Google. We have like our non-technical, client services people. And actually, I should say non-technical with qualification. They're from MIT and Carnegie Mellon and stuff like that. But from the engineering team side, the non-technical client services team, they'll do ML modeling in AutoML, the tables product, right in front of clients, and that kind of blows them away because they're just watching this happen, right before their eyes. Like, hey, give me your data set. Let's run an example, and build up a model, and after a nice little lunch break, 45 minutes later, come back and they can push that right into our system, and the customers, they can be on site and they can see results to their website immediately.
Never ever possible before in the history of time.
Literally never before. And it's just amazingly efficient. It's very impressive tool set. Internally, we can take those things, push them into Jupyter notebooks, work on them, push them into, the scaling auto ML clusters, push them into our own Kubernetes clusters for training, and be able to update and remake those models continuously based on huge inflows of real-time data. Like if we're helping customers who are interested in, buying a car, and we're seeing indications across the internet that they're doing interesting car-related things. Not only are we carving down, we're limiting the ad to the kinds of cars that they want, but we have signals that as soon as they bought that car, the ads stop. It's not good for our clients because they're probably not to buy a second car right away. It's not good for the consumers because they probably had their fill of car ads by this point.
Exactly.
The other things are just the boring parts of work. Google Bigtable is just an incredible database product. It scales to whatever we need. We've never had to re-optimize queries. You get bigger, you get twice as big, add twice as many nodes. It's just, there are a lot of cloud products that have their equivalents in other clouds. Google has these products which are very useful, which, in my opinion, don't have an equivalent.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the incredible thing. Again, I think it does make a difference when your cloud provider has actually not only created this technology for their own use, but have kind of written the industry standards around things like Kubernetes and TensorFlow, and all these things are sort of born out of necessity at Google before they were necessary anywhere else, because they were the first ones to have to scale services to the degree and globally the way that they did with Google.com and Maps and YouTube, and I mean, you name it, right? There's so many services now, Gmail, that billion plus monthly users. Nobody has more services than Google does, serving more people, more distinct services, and it's just an incredible thing that they've decided to do, which is essentially carve out, productize, SKUify, and then allow organizations like MadHive to leverage those same unique capabilities to transform into completely different businesses, or build completely different businesses. And I think that is precisely what makes Google Cloud unique. And from our standpoint, our vantage point has just been really great to watch and support that journey. And I know that you guys are just getting started as a business because the upside is just massive. If you've identified what you're describing, it's like, again, I can only imagine how big you can get, but I know that what you won't have to worry about is how are you going to scale the infrastructure to support it, to support the growth? That will not be one of your worries.
Yeah, we have enough just growing problems in the engineering team. I couldn't even imagine doing all that. That's why, yeah, I mean, being on Google Cloud, we were able to be a big advertising company on the first day.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I think this is really fantastic. I've learned a lot myself, and I think our listeners have as well. I think not only about the incredible components of blockchain and cryptography and pieces of Google Cloud that you guys are using, but really, I think we've all learned a lot about the advertising space, Aaron. So it's been really great, and I hope to do this again with you in a few months, when there's kind of more evolution of the platform. And appreciate having you guys as a client, and we're cheering for you.
Thanks.
As you guys break new ground.
I mean, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @Cloud and Clear and our website, sada.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.